Hello and welcome to your next tutorial. This one's going to focus on post-processing with Photoshop. We're actually going to have several of these short tutorials to help you get more comfortable with some of the tools in Photoshop. Let's take a look at those tools. We have the toolbar on the left side of our menu, and everybody has a personal preference here. You can either make the toolbar one long bar here, or you can make it a short double wide bar. There's absolutely no difference. So some of the tools that we use quite a bit, we use our marquee tool a lot. Now this is the tool that appears as the square here, and as we know, anytime a tool has a little arrow in the bottom corner, that means we can get different versions of it. So we can do a round marquee tool, click out of it, or we can do a rectangular marquee tool, and those are the ones you'll use most often. I think in all the times I've been using Photoshop, I may have used the little single row, I don't know, maybe twice. As we know with the marquee tool, anytime something is in the marquee tool, it's inside what we call the marching ants, and then it's able to be adjusted, it's able to be altered. Okay, another tool we're going to look at, let's deselect that. The Move tool. This is another tool that we use a lot. It's the little arrow or the cross here. What the Move tool does is it allows you to move things on your screen. So if I'm in this layer and I've got my Move tool, I can move that around any place I want on the screen. So that's what the Move tool does. The Magic Wand, which a lot of photographers call the Tragic Wand, is a select tool, and it lets you take parts of images and select them so that they are inside the Magic Wand, or I'm sorry, inside the marching ants. Let me show you an example of that. In this picture, if we wanted to select maybe this leaf to darken it, we could get our Magic Wand tool and click on it, and you'll see the marching ants appear. Now if it hasn't selected enough, we go up to the tolerance here and we can increase it. Let's take it up to 25, and it will go within 25 pixels of where we click and 25 shades. Take it up to 50, and oh wait, I put 0, no, take it up to 50, and I'm thinking that will probably select the entire leaf, pretty close. If you want to continue selecting with that, you hold the Shift key down and you just keep clicking. So I could hold the Shift and then come over and select here, etc. Remember, anything that is selected that's inside the marching ants, we can alter in Photoshop. So if we've just selected these parts right here, and just as a demonstration, we'll go into Image Adjustment, Hue Saturation. We can see that only what's within those marching ants is affected. But we're going to back up because we really don't want to do anything with that. Okay, so that's what the Magic Wand does. The Magic Wand is also associated in that same box with the Quick Select tool, which works almost the same way. It's a little bit of a more careful select tool because you can drag it like that. So I've got that selected. I can come select the peach here. So I don't have to hold the Shift key down. So it gives you more options than the Magic Wand does. When Adobe introduced the Quick Select tool, people were really happy. Again, anything that's inside those marching ants we can play with. Saturate, desaturate, etc. Cancel. Okay, back to our tools then. The next tool that we want to look at is the Color Sampler. Now this is, it appears as the little eyedropper here. And you know in Photoshop you've always got two paint buckets in front of you. And if you want to do something, you want to write something or paint in a color, you take it from either the foreground or the background. We can change the color of those by clicking on them. I click on the foreground and I can say, oh, let's look at the greens. Anywhere I click, we'll put a different shade in there, and it always previews here. And when we hit OK, that becomes our foreground color. What the sample tool does, the color sample, is it lets you select a color in your photograph. So I'm going to get this and select this sort of peach color here in this leaf. And you'll see how that has now become in our foreground. So if we wanted to paint on this, we would be painting with that, we would be painting with that color. There's no reason we want to do that, but sometimes you do need to select a color. The point is, any place you hit with your eyedropper, that will become your foreground color. Okay, back to the toolbar then. After the color sampler, we want to look at the crop tool. This is something you're going to use a lot. Here's the crop tool, and we know that we can crop something just about any way we want to. We just hit anywhere in the picture, click and hold, and we crop. We can make it bigger, smaller, wider, etc. When we've got the crop we like, we can either hit return or enter, and that will make the crop. Or we can go click here and say crop it or don't crop it, etc. Now if we decide, ooh, I really shouldn't have done that, we can always step back in our history. So I'm going to step back before the crop. One thing about the crop tool is you can set the crop tool to a specific size. This image right now is 9 inches wide by 6 inches high. If I wanted to make this 4 by 6, 6 inches tall, 4 inches wide, I could click the crop tool and then up in the menu here say I want my width at 4 and I want my height at 6, and I'm going to put my resolution at 300. We always do that if we're going to print something. Now look what happens. When I click, it will give me a 4 by 6. If I hit OK here, just this would be 4 by 6 inches. If I hit OK here, that would be 4 by 6. If I hit OK here, it would be 4 by 6. So it will give you, wherever you make the crop, the image will be 4 by 6 inches. I'm going to check it here. Image size, 4 by 6 at 300. Okay, let's step back in our history because we don't really need to do that. If you're trying to crop something though and you can't figure out why you can't get the crop you want, it's probably because you've got the size locked on here. If we hit clear, then we can crop to any size we want. Okay, back to our tools then. After the crop tool, we want to look at the lasso tool. This tool, again, as we know, anytime we've got the arrow, we've got different options inside that window. So I'm going to come over here to my toolbar, go into the lasso, and show you the 3 options. This is the freeform lasso. If we've got that, anything we circle, we just click and circle, and that gives us the marching ants. I don't think I have ever used the freeform lasso. There is the polygonal lasso, which is really good if you're trying to capture the edges of, I'm going to go in here, if we're trying to capture the edges of something. It will find the edge of an image, oops, and go in straight lines. Every time you click, you have an anchor point. Come over, click, anchor point, come up, click, anchor point, etc. To make the lasso work, you have to click, double click at the end, and the lines have to cross. So again, anything that's within that is going to be our what's selected. Okay, let's move back. This one I use a lot, the magnetic lasso, because what that does is that finds the edges of something. Let's bring our peach back up again. If I wanted to select this leaf, I could do it with the freeform lasso tool, but it's going to be hard for me. I don't have, my hand-eye coordination isn't that good. But if I use the magnetic lasso, the lasso tool itself is going to try to find the edge there. It finds where one pixel separates from another. When you click, you make another anchor point, but it's making anchor points all along. So I could click here, make an anchor point, come back. Oops, I'm going to make an anchor point here, and then come over to where I started, double click, and now just that leaf is inside the marching ants, which means anything I do to the picture will happen just within that leaf. Okay? So those are the lasso tools in the toolbar. The next tool we're going to look at is the clone tool. And the clone tool allows you to take part of an image and make a stamp out of it and stamp it over something else. Let me show you an example of the clone tool. In this image, go back to the original, there were people in the image and I didn't particularly like them there. When I shoot landscape and nature, I don't like people unless they're really adding something to it. These people weren't. So I can go to my clone tool here, and with any tool here we can make it bigger or smaller. We click on the tool, so I can make it a really big clone tool, or I could make it a tiny little clone tool, and we can make it harder or softer in the edges. I'm going to make this just a little bigger than the people I want to clone out. So I've got my tool, got my clone tool. To activate the clone tool on a PC, you hit the Alt button and that tool will turn into something that looks like, here I'll let you see it here, looks like a little compass point. On a Mac it's Option key, the Alt Option key, they're the same. So I'm going to activate my clone tool. I'm going to click once with my finger held down. I'm going to come over here now because this is where I want the clone to take place, and I'm going to click. I'm going to click several times. That's called committing to the clone, so we get the full density here. I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to, this is called reselecting. I'm going back to my original site, back to the site that I want to select, hit my Option or Alt, click, and come over and clone these guys out. So what I have done is I've gone from having an unnecessary secondary image to using the clone tool to get them out. The clone tool, I have to tell you, takes a lot of practice to get good clones. The next tool, we've used this in class, is the Sharpen and Blur. And we see that it's got the little arrow there. If we blur, we can go in, and again we can adjust the size of it and the strength of it, and you should see a blur happening here. You should see where I'm just moving that over those images, it blurs. I want to undo that by stepping back in my history. The Sharpen will do the opposite. Sometimes we just want something a little bit sharper. Go into my image, and I can take that over, and you can see how that sharpened. Let's zoom in on that. You can see how that sharpened. Come on, give me my zoom tool. How that sharpened that. So if this was before, we got our Sharpen tool, and we sharpened it. Okay, let's zoom back out. and undo that. The next tool we're going to look at then is our Dodge and Burn tool. We've worked with this in class. Because we have the little arrow, we know there are several within that. We've got the dodge that looks like a lollipop. That makes things lighter. I want to make sure I'm in my right image here. So I could dodge this, and we can see how that's making our shadows lighter. And we can make the dodge tool stronger. I really want to lighten up my shadows, and we can make it weaker. Let me undo that dodge. The burn tool, which is in the same box, makes things darker. So here I'm going to say, ooh, let's burn our midtones in here. And look what happens. See how we're burning? This is just picking up all the midtones. It's not picking up the highlights. It's not picking up the shadows. It's picking up the midtones. And again, we can decide how strong we want it. Make it really strong and do that, and we can decide how big or how small we want that. In that same option box we have the sponge, which is our saturation tool, and we're going to open up one of our images. We'll open up the peach again, and if we have this set up here on saturate, then it will pick up the color that's in there and see how it's saturating that color. When images are saturated, they become a little lighter, but what it does is it increases the color in the image. Okay, I'm going to walk back. The desaturate, if we have the sponge tool and we go to desaturate, does just the opposite. Watch how it's taking the color out of our image and turning it into a grayscale. More of a grayscale. So that's the saturate tool. We can increase the color or decrease the color. It's something to be used carefully. Use it judiciously. Okay. Our next item then, we are on the Dodge and Burn tool. The final thing we're going to look at is the eraser tool. And what the eraser tool does is exactly what it says. It lets us erase part of an image. Now, an image will erase to, I want to get into my background. An image will erase to whatever is your background color here. So I've got my eraser tool. I'm going to start erasing this, and it erases to black. Now, if we wanted to erase to white so that whatever we erased from here became white, then we would simply have to change our, right here, change our background color to white. And like any other tool, we can make it bigger, smaller, and we can make the edges harder. Let's make a really hard edge, a smaller tool, and it gives it a very hard erase there. So this is with a soft edge. You can see how the edges are very soft there. We really only use the eraser tool when we're working in layers. There's almost never another time to use that tool. So let's take a look then at all of our tools. We have our marquee tool, which selects things so that we can change them. We have our move tool, which can move something. Our magic wand, which also has the quick select in there. We have our color sampler. We have our crop tool, and we know we can set the crops how we want for size and resolution. We have our lasso tool that comes in 3 styles: freeform, magnetic, and polygonal. We have our clone tool that allows us to copy images, copy parts of an image over another part. We have our sharpen or blur tool. The smudge tool is in there. Please don't use the smudge tool. It's one of those cheesy Photoshop things that really should be taken out of the program. We have our dodge, burn, and saturate tool. and we have our eraser tool. Oops, and I'm going to get my move tool here, and whoops, I want to make sure I'm on the eraser layer here. So I want to be in the eraser layer and get my move tool and line that up again. Okay, so that is a tutorial on the basic tools, post-processing, using some of the basic tools in your toolbar. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to do more tutorials on using particular tools to get different effects. I'll leave this up on Moodle for the rest of the semester, so please review it as often as you need until you get really comfortable with at least those basic tools in the toolbar.